Hold on just a second. I am a historical architect by training. My home park is Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park in Skagway, Alaska, where I'm a resource manager, natural and cultural resources. I first came to the reserve 18 years ago. I did the math recently, and it was fun to realize that it was so long ago. I came here as a graduate student in historic preservation at the University of Oregon. I returned after that to work on my master's thesis here, studying barns, both the architecture and the family history of farming within the reserve. And then I returned one more time working on the trust board side of the house in what position Claudia now has, in the historical architect preservation coordinator position. And I left that position to pursue a National Park Service flat hat. I wanted to be uniformed year-round federal employee, so I went to Alaska, which is where a position was available, and I eventually switched from Anchorage to Skagway. So I am here as the acting superintendent for 1 year. I'm 7 months into my 1 year. I'm done at the end of July. And I was invited today to present about what the Park Service has going on, especially what the Park Service has going on this year that you guys might get questions about while you're at the Jacob and Sarah Ebey house. So with that, I am going to pause for just a second so that I can bring up my presentation when I share my screen. And then I will also turn off my video. See if I can do all this. Just a moment while I do some clicking. I can still see you guys. Can you confirm, can you hear me okay? Is my speed and volume all right?
Yes. Good.
You could turn it a little louder, Annie. You know, I'm deaf, you know.
I'll have to, I do know that. I'll have to hold it up here. Let me make this view full screen. And Al, I moved the phone closer to me.
Well, if you got on the, there you're getting some stuff now.
Okay. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, good. So here we go. Ebey's Landing National Historical Reserve. There. And it'd make it go to the next page. How do I do this? Okay, there we go. So I thought, I'm sure you all know this, but I might as well start from the beginning with a few slides. Of course, here is the Jacob and Sarah Ebey house and blockhouse and the view down Ebey's Prairie. The reserve was established in 1978 by an act of Congress in response to a threat on Ebey's Prairie to subdivide and develop the land. And within our enabling legislation, within that act that Congress passed, it established a partnership between the state parks, Island County, the National Park Service, and the town of Coupeville. And just some statistics for those of you who like numbers. The land facts, the reserve is 17,572 acres. That includes the land and Pin Cove, the acreage of Pin Cove. The boundary is delineated by tracing the 1850s donation land claims of Central Whidbey. That boundary was reinforced in 1973 when the National Register Historic District was created, and then again in 78 when Congress created the reserve. On the National Park Service side, the National Park Service owns 413 acres in what the federal government calls fee-owned, means we own it outright. And on top of that, we have 2,023 acres under scenic easement. Other terms for scenic easement is often it's called development rights or conservation easements. It's all the same word, but the Park Service within the reserve owns 2,023 acres of scenic easements. And then of our 413 fee-owned acres, 345 acres, or 74% of that the Park Service owns, are leased farmlands. And then the rest of the 68 acres is the miscellaneous other ownership. So some of that is the Bluff Trail, it's the Jacob and Sarah Ebey house, it's the Ferry House, Waysides, Pull-Offs. I know this map is small, hard to read the legend, but within the reserve,
I wrote it down.
You need to mute. Not you,
Sorry?
Annie. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Other participants talking. I heard voices too, so I stopped. Within the reserve, the bright green are the lands that are under National Park Service conservation easement. And if anyone on the call is really keeping up to date with Park Service easements, you'll notice this is a bit outdated. So there are a few that are missing that have happened in more recent years. The pink with the hatching, the lines going across, are the farmlands that we own, farmlands that are leased currently. And then the pink without hatching is just Park Service owned in fee. So a section of the Bluff Trail, the farthest northern section, the Ferry House, the woods behind the Ferry House. There's just a little bit right there for the Sarah Jacob Ebey house, the Trust Board Cottage, the Prairie Overlook, and then the Prairie Wayside. And otherwise, anything owned by the Park Service is leased farmland. So a little bit about our operation. The National Park Service, our headquarters is at the historic Rubel Farm on Fort Casey Road. We often call it Farm 2, so you'll see it on maps later as Farm 2. It's a historic dairy. It's one of the barns that I studied for my master's thesis. I am sitting in this little white house, the Gillespie House. This is where my office is. The National Park Service has 3 employees. I am the only one that is full-time year-round. So when you do the math as federal agencies tend to do, we actually have 2.2 employees. The other 2 are down here. Let me move this a second. Scott Swinson and Brad Richardson are 2 preservation carpenters, so skilled craftsmen. They did the work that took the barn from looking like this to looking like this. A lot of their skill can be seen around the reserve. They're master craftsmen. So starting with specifically what's going on this year, one of the projects Brad and Scott have been working on since last fall is to put a new foundation under the Rockwell House. The Rockwell House is at the corner of Fort Casey Road and Terry Road, and if you haven't seen it, it's still up on blocks like this. You should make a point to drive by. It's nice to see it. The house dates back to 1890. The bottom left is the earliest photograph I could find of it. Obviously, it's not that clear. It was a panoramic of the whole prairie, but it happened to be in the foreground. And in the top left was a really great site plan, annotated site plan that I dug up, that the former reserve manager, Rob Harbour, had interviewed a man who lived in the house in the 1930s, and they talked about the landscape. So Rob made a drawing and annotated what was in their garden and where the outbuildings were. But back to Brad and Scott, they raised the house last fall through a contract with house movers. They lifted the house, and it has cribbing underneath it. They are just finishing up hand digging a new foundation that is within the existing historic stone foundation. So it was important for us that the stone foundation stayed on the outside, that's what you would be able to see. So they're putting in a poured concrete footer and stem wall inside that stone foundation so that from the outside, when the house is lowered again, it will still look like it's sitting on its original stone foundation. But you all and I will know that within that there's a new structure holding the building up. And the house will be lowered in April. So by the time the Jacob and Sarah Ebey house opens, this probably won't be a topic of conversation anymore because tourists won't be seeing it. But just in case you guys had seen it through the winter, it should be lowered back down on its foundation next month. What you will see this summer, and we have a 2-year funding and staffing push to do some much-needed work at the Ferry House. So, of course, the Ferry House, the icon of the prairie, constructed 1860. We have U.S. Navy funds coming in, and the National Park Service is matching those funds. And so together, we are designing and installing a fire suppression and security system within the Ferry House. And then also, Brad and Scott, plus we hire one seasonal employee this summer, will be replacing the roof this summer. So you'll see a new shingle roof go on, replacing what was there now. And then before the end of calendar year 2023, they will also repair the foundation, remove and rehabilitate the windows and doors, and we're also doing structural repairs on the inside, trying to conceal a little bit of the reinforced structure work so that we can take down on the bottom right. You see what the inside looks like now with these structure walls inside. So we're going to redesign the necessary support structure and have it not be so obvious.
I'm on the Zoom.
Just a shout out to the great work that these guys do. These are the outbuildings of Privy and the summer kitchen, and they rehabilitated those in 2019. And they will now, the summer kitchen will house the fire suppression and security system, and the piping and wires will go through a utilidor and pop up into the Ferry House from underneath, so that there won't be any visible pipes or wires. Let's see. Okay. So then I thought I would take the opportunity to just talk about the historic farm leases. I pointed them out on the map before. We are in our second year of a 10-year lease with Island Potato, and they lease the former Ingle Dairy, what the Park Service calls Farm 1. This red dot right there, I realize it's small on your screen, is the Rockwell House. So that is not a part of their lease, but they lease the land around it. And they have 115 acres. Historically, the Ingle family used the land, grazing, crop production. It was a former dairy. And it has approximately 75 acres of cropland in this portion of what they lease from us. And then the facilities that are here, for anyone who's not familiar with the site, it's 131,000 square feet of facilities. That's quite a lot. I already mentioned the Rockwell House is not a part of the lease, but the other buildings are, and things like a manure lagoon separator, a stormwater capture system that the Park Service installed in 2017. And as part of their operations, they will have the land here certified organic by the end of 2023. And they do have cattle on site. They do replacement cattle for dairies. And then the other property, one of the other properties that they lease from us is the land that surrounds my office. This in red is that historic Rubel farm that I showed before. I'm sitting right here in this house. And I'm surrounded on 3 sides by certified organic potatoes. So it's 101 acres. They are certified organic here. The Rubel Farm Complex is not a part of their lease. We hold that out for our own operations. But within the lease, they have some flexibility on what they can do within the land. They just happen to choose to grow their organic potatoes here. again, going back to work that we're accomplishing this year, this is the same Rubel farm, Farm 2. We got organic potatoes surrounding us. As part of the Whidbey Camano Land Trust's Walking Ebey's Trail that's opening this summer, we are putting in about 0.3 of a mile of trail along Fort Casey Road, between Fort Casey Road and the potato fields. We're going to put in a trail that will connect a branch of Walking Ebey's that comes this way and a branch of Walking Ebey's that will go this way. And so ours is a missing link in there. So we're going to put that trail in right along the edge of the field this summer. And for anyone who has ever done trail work, it's all about mitigating water. And so we're having phone calls with landscape architects and cultural landscape architects talking about culverts, and we don't want to change the way the water is draining on the field, and there's an existing culvert, and we're just trying to get our trail to go fit in there. So it will go between Fort Casey Road and the organic potato fields, and will fit in as part of the cultural landscape. So right now there are a hedgerow there that will shield the trail from the road. We're also talking about the historic fence line that ran in this part of the property and putting that back. So it takes a lot of consideration before we put in a trail, but this one is well-timed to go in to be part of the Walking Ebey's trail system. And Whidbey Camano Land Trust is taking the lead on that trail system, but I am guessing that we'll all hear more about it this summer as they have a grand opening scheduled at some point. I'm not sure of their schedule. So some of the other work that the Park Service does, this work is done in partnership with Island County, the Nature Conservancy, Washington State Parks, and the National Park Service. Those are the 4 entities that own land along the landing. So as you know, the landing is quite a patchwork of land ownership, and we together try to manage weeds, and specifically poison hemlock, but also blackberries. And so this is the National Park Service weed crew. They're based out of North Cascades, and they come down and spray herbicide and help our partners manage that poison hemlock. So one of the projects that you will see in your backyard when you're at the Jacob and Sarah Ebey House this year is a partnership with Harrison Goodall, a local preservation professional. We're so lucky to have him on the island. He is partnering with volunteers that he's worked with for something like 20 years. They've been in the reserve before. They're volunteers out of Michigan who travel the world and take on hands-on preservation projects on historic sites. And so with Harrison and this team of volunteers from Michigan, the last of the Pratt family outbuildings will be finally preserved. And there's a picture of it. If you've walked the new Pratt Loop around the farm field behind the Ebey House, you go right by this particular outbuilding and the former equipment shed from the Pratt family. And what they're going to do is they're going to re-roof it, 24-inch cedar shingles. For those of you who might be familiar with cedar shingles, 24-inch is not a normal size that they make anymore, so that's been a struggle trying to find those particular shingles. It's always important, again, water. They're going to regrade the site to move the water away from the base of the building, do some exterior siding repair, fix some of the foundation where the posts are slipping off their rocks, rehabilitate the sliding doors, treat the entire building with boracare, which gets rid of insects that bore into the wood and compromise its integrity. And then this much needed, always appreciated document for Park Service records is a record of treatment. Harrison's going to create a document that explains what they did and provides photographs. So again, this is happening the last 2 weeks in July. And so you will see an influx of faces moving around the former Pratt property as they go to and from the work site the last 2 weeks of July. And I encourage any of you to go out and check it out and see what they're doing, and encourage them as they do some great work for us. The last part of that is that Harrison's really interested during those 2 weeks to give credit where credit is due to the Pratt family and their legacy of stewardship within the reserve. And so I'm not sure if he's going to make an ask of anyone in particular, but if any of you are particularly interested in the Pratt family and would like to participate in what Harrison's putting together, he's interested in just recognizing the effort that the Pratt family made to save the prairie. And I just did a quick list of some of the local places that used to be in the Pratt family. So the Bluff Trail, the Jenny Farm. Many of you probably know that Mrs. Pratt was a Cone and local family, and her sister married a Jenny, so she is an in-law to the Jenny, so that was a family farm. They used to own that. The Ferry House, the Jacob and Sarah Ebey House, 2 sheep barns. This is, in this photograph, is the Nature Conservancy sheep barn that's tucked up against the backside of the Bluff Trail. And then, of course, outbuildings like the equipment shed that Harrison's going to be working on this summer, and then, of course, the farmland that's behind the Jacob and Sarah Ebey House, and all the way out to this barn is Nature Conservancy land, plus a large chunk of the prairie used to be owned by the Pratt family. They do have a nice legacy, and Harrison's looking to recognize that this summer. And then finally, Jordan asked me to give you guys a takeaway, one thing that you might leave this presentation with. And of course, for the reserve, it's all about partnerships. We can't do any of this by ourselves, and so we partner as often as possible. And whether or not that's the Whidbey-Camano Land Trust or the Nature Conservancy, volunteers from Michigan, the county, for weeds or trails or historic buildings, everything done here is part of a partnership. And there we go. The Park Service is one of those 4 partners. So, Jordan, that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn my video back on, and hopefully I can see everyone again and participate in a discussion or questions.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much, Annie. That was such good information and definitely applicable, especially that Pratt shed, because I know we'll get a lot of questions there the last couple weeks in July and even before that as they're preparing for the project. So thank you for the update there. So helpful. Does anyone have questions for Annie?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Lou.
On the Rockwell House, what's going to be the future use of that building?
That hasn't been determined. Right now, we're going to lower it back down, and that's the end of the plan for now.
Okay.
You, Patrick.
Yeah, Annie, thank you. Oh, we can see you, I guess, but super interesting. But first of all, I want to say, hey, hi, Al. It's Patrick.
Oh.
Good to see you, my friend. So a couple of comments. Annie, is it contemplated once the ferry house is fully rehabbed sometime in 2023? Do you know if it's going to, I'm sorry? Oh. What is she saying? You can't hear me? Or
He's connecting to audio, it says.
oh, okay, I'll stop, I guess.
That's okay. I think
Can she hear me?
Not yet.
Okay, not
Not
yet.
yet.
All right. Thank you, Joanne. All right.
Just paying attention here.
No, you're a Zoomer, a Zoomer.
Oh, yeah. So Jordan, do you know anything about what Harrison's going to do with the Pratt Legacy program?
Yeah, so he just, there's still discussion and exactly what's happening. But speaking of Harrison, he will be meeting with us in 2 weeks, Monday, April 4th at 1 p.m. And so he will be talking about, I forget his title specifically, but different historic structures within the reserve. So you guys will get a Zoom link to that this week. So he'll be meeting with us in just a couple weeks, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about that. So yeah.
Good. We'll just save questions for them.
Okay, so
there you go.
you can hear me now, Annie?
I can. Sorry. Can you
No
hear
problem.
me?
Yeah, I hear you fine. So it's super interesting. Just a couple of quick questions for you. So is it contemplated that once the ferry house is, fully rehabbed, restored 2023, is that going to be then reopened for the public to visit? Or do you know, or too soon to tell? Or
No, not on the inside. There is no plan for visitors to go inside the ferry house, but the grounds are open now and they will continue to be open. One of the things that we have funding for are interpretive panels on site, and so there will hopefully be more on-site interpretation of the location, but no, not for interior visits.
okay. And your master's thesis on the barns, that's got me curious. Can we get a copy of that, or can I get a copy of that?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to see there's interest. There are 2 paper copies up at the trust board office.
Okay.
It's a 376-page document. So
Okay.
I have trouble sharing it electronically, but I do have it in PDF if you would rather have a digital copy.
That would be great. I will send you my email. I don't have your email, but I can get
Let's
it.
just connect through Jordan. Yeah, that would
Okay.
be, that's
Oh,
great.
ask Jordan. Okay, super duper. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm. Joanne, I see you. Could go ahead.
Sorry, was clicking on the wrong unmute. Would it be possible for us to have a copy of that land ownership map where the cooperative parts are, up at the Jacob and Sarah Ebey house or at the trust board office or somewhere?
Yeah, that's a Jordan question. There are definitely maps around the trust
Okay.
board office. It would be whether or not they could make their way to the Ebey house this summer.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get one laminated, Joanne, and we'll have that out at the house this summer. Great thought.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for naming all those houses, because I don't always remember or know their names.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, Annie, thank you so very much for meeting with us today. I hope to see you in person soon. And I know the others who aren't able to make it today are looking forward to the recording as well. So thank you so much for meeting with us. And we'll see you out at the Ebey house, hopefully this summer.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. All right, bye everyone.